A reading from that ancient book, De Re Metalica. To the most illustrious and most mighty dukes of Saxony, Landgraves of Thuringia, Margraves of Messine, imperial overlords of Saxony, burgraves of Altenburg and Magdeburg, counts of Brenna, lords of Plesnerland, to Maurice, Grand Marshal and Elector of the Holy Roman Empire, and to his brother Augustus, George Agricola, S.D. Most illustrious princes, often I have considered the metallic arts as a whole, as Moderatus Columella considered the agricultural arts, just as if I had been considering the whole of the human body, and when I had perceived the various parts of the subject like so many members of the body, I became afraid that I might die before I should understand its full extent, much less before I could immortalize it in writing. This book itself indicates the length and breadth of the subject and the number and importance of the sciences of which at least some little knowledge is necessary to miners. Indeed, the subject of mining is a very extensive one and one very difficult to explain. No part of it is fully dealt with in the Greek and Latin authors whose works survive, and since the art is one of the most ancient, the most necessary, and the most profitable to mankind, I consider that I ought not to neglect it. Without doubt, none of the arts is older than agriculture, but that of the metals is not less ancient. In fact, they are at least equal and coeval, for no mortal man ever tilled a field without implements. In truth, in all the works of agriculture, as in the other arts, implements are used which are made from metals, or which could not be made without the use of metals. For this reason, the metals are of the greatest necessity to man. When an art is so poor that it lacks metals, it is not of much importance, for nothing is made without tools. Besides, of all ways whereby great wealth is acquired by good and honest means, none is more advantageous than mining. For although from fields which are well tilled, not to mention other things, we derive rich yields, yet we obtain richer products from mines. In fact, one mine is often much more beneficial to us than many fields. For this reason, we learn from the history of nearly all ages that very many men have been made rich by the mines, and the fortunes of many kings have been much amplified thereby. But I will not now speak more of these matters, because I have dealt with these subjects partly in the first book of this work and partly in the other work entitled De Vetribus et Novus Metallis, where I have refuted the charges which have been made against metals and against miners. Now, though the art of husbandry, which I willingly rank with the art of mining, appears to be divided into many branches, yet it is not separated into so many as this art of ours, nor can I teach the principles of this as easily as Columella, Columella, sorry, I'm brutalizing that name, did of that. He had at hand many writers upon husbandry whom he could follow. In fact, there are more than 50 Greek authors whom Marcus Varro enumerates, and more than 10 Latin ones. When Columella himself mentions, I have only one whom I can follow, that of C. Plinius Secundus, and he expounds only a very few methods of digging ores and of making metals. Far from the whole of the art having been treated by any one writer, those who have written occasionally on any one or another of its branches have not even dealt completely with a single one of them. Moreover, there is a great scarcity even of these, since alone of all the Greeks, Strato of Lambasacus, the successor of Theophrastus, wrote a book on the subject, De Machinis Metallis, except perhaps a work by the poet Philo, a small part of which embraced to some degree the occupation of mining. Pherocrates seemed to have introduced into his comedy, which was similar in title, miners as slaves, or as persons condemned to serve in the mines. Of the Latin writers, Pliny, as I have often said, has described few methods A few methods of working also among the authors. I must include the modern writers, whosoever they are, for no one should escape such condemnation who fails to award due recognition to a person whose writing he uses, even very slightly. Two books have been written in our tongue. The one on the assaying of mineral substances and metals, somewhat confused, whose author is unknown. The other on veins, of which Pandolphus Anglus is also said to have written, although the German book was written by Calbus of Friedberg, a well known doctor, but neither of them accomplished the task he had begun. Recently, Vannucci Berenguccio of Siena, a wise man experienced in many matters, wrote a vernacular Italian on the subject of the melting, separating, and alloying of metals. He touched briefly on the methods of smelting certain ores and explained more fully the methods of making certain juices. By reading his directions, I have refreshed my memory of those things which I myself saw in Italy. As for many matters on which I write, he did not touch upon them all, or touched but lightly. This book was given me by Franciscus Badorius, a patrician of Venice, a man of wisdom and of repute. This he had promised that he would do when in the previous year he was at Marienburg, having been sent by the Venetians as an ambassador to King Ferdinand. Beyond these books, I do not find any writings on the metallic arts. For that reason, even if the book of Strato existed, from all these sources, not one half of the whole body of the science of mining could be pieced together. Seeing that there have been so few who have written on the subject of the metals, it appears to me all the more wonderful that so many alchemists have arisen who would compound metals artificially and who could change one into another. Hermolaus Barbarus, a man of high rank and station, and distinguished in all kinds of learning, has mentioned the names of many in his writings. I will prefer more, but only famous ones, for I will limit myself to a few. Thus, Othenes, who has written on Latin word, and there are Hermes, Chanes, Zosimus, and Alexandrian to his sister Theosebia, Olympiodorus, also Alexandrian, Agathodemion, Democritus, and not the one of Adiberta, but some other whom I know not, Auras, Chrysoricus. These names are killing me, dude, seriously. Pedicus, Comerius, Jonas, Apuleius, Ptasius, Pelagius, Africanus, Theophilus, Synesius, Stephanus, to Hercules, Caesar, Herodotus, to Theodosius, Geber, Calides, Radinius, Canides, Merlin, Raymond Lully, Arnold de Villanova, and Augustinus Pantheus of Venice, and three women, Cleopatra the maiden, Taphanutia, and Maria the Jewess. All these alchemists employ obscure language, and Jonas Aurelius Aguilera's of Rimini also used the language of poetry. There are many other books on this subject. All are difficult to follow because the writers upon these things use strange names which do not properly belong to the metals, and because some of them employ now one name and now another, invented by themselves, though the thing itself changes not. These masters teach their disciples that the base metals, when smelted, are broken up. Also, they teach the methods by which they reduce them to the primary parts and remove whatever is superfluous in them, and by supplying what is wanted, make out of them the precious metals, that is gold and silver, all of which they carry out in a crucible. Whether they can do these things or not, I cannot decide. But seeing that so many writers assure us with all earnestness that they have reached that goal for which they had aimed, it would seem that faith might be placed in them, yet also seeing that we do not read of any of them ever having become rich by this art, nor do we now see them growing rich, although so many nations everywhere have produced and are producing alchemists, and all of them are straining every nerve night and day to the end that they may heap a great quantity of gold and silver. I should say the matter is dubious, but although it may be due to the carelessness of the writers that they have not transmitted to us the names of the masters who acquired great wealth through this occupation, certainly it is clear that their disciples either do not understand their precepts, or that they do not understand them, do not follow them, for they do comprehend them, seeing that these disciples have been and are so numerous that they would have by today filled whole towns with gold and silver. Even their books proclaim their vanity, for they inscribe in them the names of Plato and Aristotle and of other philosophers, in order that such high sounding inscriptions may impose upon simple people and pass for learning. There is another class of alchemists who do not change the substance of base metals, but color them to represent gold or silver, so that they appear to be that which they are not. And when this appearance is taken from them by fire, as if it were a garment foreign to them, they return to their own character. These alchemists, since they deceive people, are not only held in the greatest odium, but their frauds are a capital offense. No less a fraud warranting capital punishment is committed by the third sort of alchemists. These throw into a crucible a small piece of gold or silver hidden in a coal, and after mixing therewith fluxes which have the power of extracting it, pretend to be making gold from orpiment, or silver from tin, and like substances. But concerning the art of alchemy, if it be an art, I will speak further elsewhere. I will now return to the art of mining, since no authors have written of this art in its entirety, and since foreign nations and races do not understand our tongue, and if they did understand it, they would be able to learn only a small part of the art through the works of those authors whom we do possess. I have written these 12 books, De Re Metalica. Of these, the first book contains the arguments which may be used against this art and against metals and the mines, and what can be said in their favor. The second book describes the miner and branches into a discourse on finding veins. The third book deals with veins and stringers and seams in the rock. The fourth book explains the method of delimiting veins, and also describes the functions of the mining officials. The fifth book describes the digging of ore and the surveyor's art. The sixth book describes the miner's tools and machines. The seventh book is on the assaying of ore. The eighth book lays down the rules of the work of roasting, crushing, and washing the ore. The ninth book explains methods of smelting ores. The 10th book instructs those who are studious of the metallic arts in the work of separating silver from gold and lead from gold and silver.